if you were talking to a young artist who's got promising work, they haven't yet started using social media, they haven't really sold their work yet, what would be your advice?
My advice would be to start social media and start documenting your work as early as possible. The big thing that people in that situation need to understand is that documenting your work is a different skill. Making content is a different skill. Instagram is not about art. Instagram is about entertainment. And if you can find a way to entertain people with your work or your personality, then you will be successful. But start early because it's a skill that you're going to have to develop.
Welcome to the Josie Lewis Show, where it's artist to artist chat about making your art and selling your art. That golden nugget we just heard was from ceramic artist Curt Hammerly, who has built a thriving ceramic studio primarily from his Instagram. In this conversation, we hear about his devastating brush with death and how that completely pivoted his entire life, how he transitioned from his traditional job to his art career, and now how he manages all the ins and outs of running a creative business. This conversation is absolutely full of incredible insights that I know will inspire you. Let's listen. Well, hello, Curt Hammerly. How are you doing?
Doing well? How you doing, Josie?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation because I've been
My
following
pleasure.
your pots and pot making for probably several years. I'm glad you have one on camera. I forgot to, I have a couple. One of them broke. It was one of my saddest moments in my
Oh
life when
no.
I broke a Curt mug. Ah, it was
It's one
my
of
favorite.
the it's one of the worst things about this art form, especially making functional stuff, is that it's not indestructible. And my
Nope.
stuff is about as indestructible as it possibly gets.
And I
But
I can tell you exactly what happened, and you're gonna just be like, Josie, because I took your mug camping.
oh
And
boy.
yeah, to be fair, we have a camper, and so like we can store stuff carefully, and it's
Okay,
like
okay,
a
okay.
little kitchen on wheels. But somehow I don't know, we were like packing up to go, and the mug went in a bin, and it just wasn't. It was rattled around, and so the handle fell off, which was just.
Dang.
So I still have it because it's still beautiful. I just
Nice.
anyway,
These things happen.
these things
Porcelain
do
is
happen. Yes.
is fragile a little bit.
Right. Right. So can you describe what it is you do? Because I know that I have a little bit of a hand building and wheel throwing background, but that is not what you do. So explain your process.
So I went to design school and I use 3D modeling and my experience 3D printing to make mold forms of my own design. And then I cast those in porcelain and I use all in-house made from scratch glazes. And yeah, I just make lots and lots of things with lots and lots of texture and glazes and just have fun with all of it.
Yeah, and one of the things that's kind of cool about your mugs that's unusual is that they are geometric in many cases, where they have, because of the computer generated
Yeah,
pouring molds that you do.
so it's interesting. A lot of people think of using molds as a way to kind of make things faster, but from the beginning, I really wanted to focus on making things that either had perfect symmetry or some kind of geometric perfection that would be incredibly laborious to do by hand. And so, yes, in that sense, it does speed things up, but I try to do things that would be so obscenely time consuming by hand that they just wouldn't be possible um, in a marketplace. Like the mugs would be so expensive if someone was making these by hand. So that's always been my goal, is to steer away from anything that could be made quickly on the wheel or hand built or with any other form, and just really step up the insanity as much as I can with the technology.
Well, it really brings the wow, because it's a, this is like made by a person. It's not made by a factory. And yet it's hard to wrap your mind around how it actually, even when I watch your videos where you're I mean, because you do not gatekeep, you show your process,
Oh
and I
yeah.
still can't wrap my mind around it. I'm like, how?
I think it's one of the most interesting things is so many people try to hide their process. And I'm like, if you want to do this, bring it on because it's taken a long time to get here.
Yeah, I love, I mean, that's my opinion too. And it's not, my process isn't that hard, but I'm like, sure, go for it. Why
But you
not?
add so much complexity in it and bounce around to different things that, yeah, it's almost a different thing. Neither one of us are artists that have grabbed onto one tiny little innovation that we had at some point and then just repeated that ad infinitum. And I think that that's the more important part today is that anything you show, especially on Instagram with a massive audience, there are going to be people that have the ability to copy it. It's not possible for that not to happen. So might as well lean into it and just keep changing faster than hopefully they can catch you. But we also have our followings where people are buying our pieces for our brand and our name and not just because of what it looks like. So,
Well, yeah, and I think that was going to be my next question, because somebody can make a Josie Lewis like painting or a Kurt Hammerly like mug,
absolutely.
and I welcome that. And I think it sounds like you do too. Like, go for it, make, create your own thing. But uh there's something about, that there's a great marketing coach called Seth Godin who has a phrase which is famous to the family. And so the idea is, I'm not famous Kardashian style, but
Yeah.
I'm famous to my little group,
Mm-hmm.
and my little group is not going to be like, yeah, I want a fake Josie, like they're going to be like,
Yeah.
no, I want a painting made by Josie, or
Yeah. I
I
don't
want a
want to
mug by Kurt.
just
I don't
to
want,
save a
yeah.
couple bucks or something.
Right. Yeah. Oh, sure. I can find one for 50 rather than 100, but I
Yeah.
want a Kurt mug. I don't want, because
That's
we
the
have,
goal.
that's the goal. We start to have a relationship with the people that are, in our orbit, and get to know
Yeah.
our
And
personality,
the
and,
way that what we're doing in the way that we're doing things, people aren't necessarily, I mean, a lot of times they are buying the piece that they're buying because they like that piece, but they're also buying in to our story and wanting us to keep doing what we're doing. And that's their way to feel like they've contributed and helped with that and helped push the narrative along and the story along. So we have that going for us as well.
yes. I mean, one of the things that I often think is that I make art police videos, which you may have seen, the
Of course.
satire about my haters. And I there's no way to test this or to know conclusively, but I think those art police videos help me sell more art than
Oh yeah.
anything else. Like, I can show my process, and that's really fun and satisfying. But I think when I show personality and make people
Oh
laugh,
yeah.
make people think, then it's
Yeah.
like, oh wow, I love Josie so much. And yes, she has a shop update.
Yep.
I'm buying,
Yep.
So
There are people out there that have such absolutely phenomenally incredible work that they can sell it all day for whatever price without ever showing their face or sharing their personality. But I don't think I'm in that category. And I find this to be a lot more fulfilling and generally satisfying over the long term.
you mean it's more satisfying to create that relationship and show your personality?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Show my personality, share parts of my life. I have hobbies that I share. Last night, I shared some cooking stuff in my story. I'm always sharing my house plants. I share a little bit of my family. We are heading into building a studio on my property from the ground up. And the amount of excitement that some of the followers seem to have around seeing this project come to life is pretty crazy. And I'm very excited to share every step of the design and building process. And hopefully in 12 months, we'll not be in the studio that you see anymore. And that's been the dream for 6 years now. And we're finally making it happen. And they get so excited about it.
Yeah. And I think that there's something is so interesting about the life story that people can enter into. And maybe in some cases it's kind of like people don't have creative jobs, and maybe they have
I
a
hear that a
shadow
lot.
artist They sort of
Yeah.
have like this, oh, I wish I could, but I'm a teacher, I'm an accountant, I'm a doctor. I can't,
Yeah.
I didn't go that path, but I can live vicariously through you.
Yeah. And I hear that. And that's a very interesting thing to hear, but it makes complete sense because back before I started selling, especially when I just started dipping my toes into pottery classes, I followed all the people online and I thought it was so cool to see their growth and their development and their work change over time. So I was one of those people that was sitting at my desk behind my phone, just like, this job sucks, and just scrolling through Instagram and watching what cool stuff people were doing. So it definitely makes sense, but it's still pretty surreal to have people that invested in your journey.
I remember hearing a bit about your story that you were in the office and then you had a brush with death. Can you tell us about that story and how that changed your trajectory?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't share this on Instagram anymore. It used to be a big part of I was trying to encourage others that had been through things with my story, but I stopped because I got so incredibly lucky and started hearing the stories of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that did not get as lucky as I did. So I want to preface the story with that because as bad as what happened to me happened, it was not. I have very few lifelong problems due to it, but um, I was working for the university up at CU Boulder for the architecture school, running their fabrication shop, and I rode my bike to work every day, and I was riding one day in September of like 2011. I actually don't even remember the year off the top of my head, but I was crossing a crosswalk, and this minivan was going east, driving right into the sun, and didn't see me and hit me going 35 miles an hour. And I broke my neck and 7 ribs and had a ruptured spleen, kidney, and liver, and collapsed one of my lungs. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital and 3 months in a traction halo with 4 titanium screws in my head to heal my neck, my broken neck. And after that, I was sitting on the couch on various drugs for multiple months at a time, just waiting for my body to heal. And afterwards, I couldn't go back to riding my bike. I couldn't go back to running or lifting weights. So I randomly decided to take my first pottery class at about 25 years old. Then from there, I took a pottery class, another pottery class, another pottery class. It never really intended to be something that pulled me in. So like I didn't go into it with any intent. I was just like, I need to kill some time. And to be perfectly honest, I thought that it would be a halfway decent way to meet some women because after my accident, I was pretty lonely. But it turns out that that was not the case and that every class I ever took was full of 60-year-olds. And it didn't work out. But I just had this ever growing passion for what I was doing. And I found myself sitting at my job every day, just thinking about things to make in the next class, thinking about things to make in the next open session, filling my sketchbook with ideas. And then because I worked in this situation in the design school where I had access to 3D printers, laser cutters, stuff like that, I started thinking of, well, what could I do while I'm sitting at my job to learn the technology that is in my office, but simultaneously find a way to blend clay and this passion that I was developing for that with this 10 years of experience that I had with 3D modeling and 3D printing. And that manifested as just designing a bonsai pot in my 3D modeling software, 3D printing it, and then just pouring plaster over the top of it on my dining room table.
So then how did the business develop?
So I was just a lurker on Instagram for years and years and just following these people. And I was like, man, they're doing such cool stuff and they're sharing what they're doing. I think I'm doing something kind of interesting that I don't see a lot of other people doing. Maybe I should start sharing on Instagram. No intent of ever even selling anything. I don't think I sold stuff for the first 18 months or 2 years that I was even on Instagram. First 6 months, I posted pictures of my work. It was mostly wheel thrown stuff at that point. I think I got up to like 200 followers in that first 6 months. And then I posted my first video. And this was, you know how this went. You've told the story a bunch of times. Like everyone was like, Instagram's a photo app. And you're like, no. From the minute that they said you could put a video on there, it was a fucking video app. instantly. So I started filming on my DSLR, editing in Premiere Pro on a laptop, then putting it back on my phone and uploading videos. And I went from 200 followers to about 30,000 in the next 6 months. And as soon as I started posting videos, it started rocketing. You know how this goes. And just kept growing. And then I started having people asking, like, you're showing all this stuff. Like, are you going to ever sell anything? And I was sitting at my job, like, I kind of already have a job. I'm pretty happy with it. But in the background, I was like, man, I'm really, as a potter, other potters will relate to this as well. But as you're making stuff, it just starts piling up. And there's only so much you can give to your friends and your family. So I was like, okay, I'll start an Etsy. And started an Etsy and put like 6 things up. And it took like a month for all 6 to sell or something like that. And then I put some more up and some more up. This was in March. And then by the holiday season, I was up to putting a full kiln load of stuff, which is about 60 to 80 pieces. And I took the week of Thanksgiving off of work and slacked off Thanksgiving with my family and just made as much stuff as I could. Put it online for Cyber Monday, I think it was. And everything sold out in like 3 days. And then I was sitting at my job getting DMs from people on Instagram like, hey, my wife, brother, sister, husband wants a piece of your work. Where are they? And so I was just sitting at my job getting all these messages of people that are just like, what the fuck, man? Like, are you going to sell anything? And I'm like, I already did. I sold more than I ever have, and it's gone. I think this was probably at like 50,000 Instagram followers at the time, and was just kind of like, man, this is getting crazy. So kept making stuff, kept selling out, kept making stuff, kept selling out, kept growing the Instagram. And at some point, I matched my salary from my job for 2 months in a row, working just part-time at the side hustle, and went in my boss's office a year later and said that I'm done. I'm going to go give this other thing a try. Went and worked out of my basement.
Yeah, well, same. I still am in my basement.
Which has its benefits.
Which
We could do an entire other podcast about that, because I don't know how much you know, but I scaled up to 6 employees last year and got a second space, and it turned out to be the most stressful year of my life for various reasons. Working with other companies has its ups and downs, a lot of downs, but I think you might have gone the better route. I'm very excited to getting back to a home studio, and hopefully next year I will be there.
Yeah, I've used both. I've used out of the house studios. I've used studio lofts with other artists. I've been, certainly I bought a condo that I used as a studio.
Oh, wow. I
Now,
had
I
no
mean, I've
idea.
done lots of different things, and now I have my whole lower level is, and to
Mhm.
be fair, it's like it's a walkout. So, we have a big window
Hell
and it
yeah.
overlooks a park. So it's not like a dark and dank basement, but it's probably about 1,000 square feet. So we we have plenty of room, and I have a spray booth room and a shipping room
Hell
and
yeah.
so it's a big home studio,
Yeah.
but especially with a kid. I know you have a little kid now, and
Yeah.
it's like being home around a kid is great. That's helpful. So
Yes. And I'm excited for that. He just turned 3 on Wednesday, and by the time I'm back in the house, he'll be in preschool, and I think it'll be a lot better situation.
yeah. So it sounds like Instagram really was a partner to your business.
It
Like it
was
was it was the what
everything.
drove it.
Oh
Yeah, it was
yeah.
everything.
I mean,
Yeah.
to this day, probably 98% of my revenue comes from people from Instagram buying stuff. I always say that a couple years ago, Hammerly Ceramics shifted a little bit more towards business than art. And I'm really excited for the day when I get to shift the focus back towards the art and less towards the business. But man, I'm so bored. I'm so bored.
So you're bored
So yeah,
artistically?
I am bored of doing production. I work a lot, and I'm really finding it harder and harder every day to come in and make enough stuff to sell to make the money that we need to get to that next step. And the goal is that a year from now, when we're in the home studio, I'm going to cut production by 50%.
So how does the running a business designing new products, manufacturing, shipping, managing a team, managing spaces. How do you and having a life, a family, a child, like
A
other
life is a
things?
stretch, but
I
I do have
presume
a
you have
wife and a
friends,
child.
right? You have a wife and a child. You need to sleep sometimes, you have some needs. So how do you manage that with posting to Instagram?
Not great. It's just I have, and I'm interested to know if you're in this boat too. I don't plan content at all. Do you plan things? For the years,
Yeah.
I have found a way to integrate it into my workflow where I have multiple tripods sitting in the studio, and I have become good enough at just filming when I'm doing stuff. Um, and then trying to desperately find the time to edit it and get it up. Uh,
So you're 100% the sole creator and social media manager
yeah.
of your
Yep.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. Photographer, videographer, editor, all of that. I do all of that stuff myself. I would have a really hard time passing that off. I feel like once people do, it becomes a little soulless and doesn't have that same thing. One of the biggest comments that I get on a regular basis, and I think this is important to share with people that are trying to get into this or trying to make it work, is people constantly tell me that my enthusiasm for what I'm doing is what's the most like what keeps them coming back for more. And I think that the interesting side of that is that I am genuinely very excited. Like, I think the most recent comment I got about that was when I pulled out, I have this new jar design. It has this really interesting or complex Gothic architecture style design on top. And it's something that was out of my wheelhouse design wise and 3D modeling wise. And to see it come out of that mother mold for the first time is genuinely super exciting. So putting that into my content of how excited I am about what I'm doing and how I can't wait to see it when it finally is made in clay in a week or so. That excitement is genuine, and just finding a way to capture that and convey it to people, I think, is so important. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that I can't plan content, is because if it doesn't have the spontaneity and the excitement of being in the moment, I just don't think it works. It doesn't work to just take pretty pictures and video of your work and just post it and be like, buy my shit. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah. So back to the question, I don't have a good way to balance it. I just try to live my life the way that it needs to be lived to make this all work, and then capture those moments of excitement and I guess artistry. I don't even know if I'd use that word, but like there are a lot of hours in the day that are spent doing the marketing, the business, the management, all those things that you said. But there are those small moments that are when I'm doing something truly exciting for me. And those are the moments that I try to capture.
I mean, it's so interesting because I feel like I've now talked to many, many artists, and the theme, there may be people who do it differently, but the theme is I just kind of do what I want. I work
Yeah.
hard, but I follow my impulses, and
Yeah.
I go with the flow. And
Yeah, and I think that those impulses are developed over time. When I was getting started, it was so hard to like remember to make content, and it's something that I hear from a lot of people. That might be one of the skills that I'm the best at, is integrated things into my workflow. And then over time, when you do it enough, it just becomes a habit. And once it's a habit, then you don't have to think about it and you can think about other shit. One of those people that's like, I eat the same thing every day, I wear the same thing every day, I do everything in the same
yeah.
order every day, because it frees up my brain power to do the things that I want to do creatively.
One question I have, like, so we're doing like this really responsive marketing where it's not, I've worked with big box stores, and their marketing is 12 months out. They're planning what's going to be on
Yeah.
the end cap
Yeah.
14, 16, like months out. It's a long period. And in the holiday season, I'm like, oh, this particular style is selling. I'm going to make a bunch more of those on
Oh yeah.
December 10th,
Oh yeah. Okay, so this is
So
an interesting concept. I have a friend that works for a very big, he's a designer for a very big outdoor brand. And he came into my studio and we sat down and I showed him on my website, the analytics that we pull every month to see what's popular, what sells first, what gets the most views. And he's like, dude, we don't do any of this shit. We sit down every year and we like pick colors out of our asses. And I'm like, that's interesting because yeah, we pulled data from the first week of November and that informs what I will be making in the third week of November. Like it moves that quickly that like, I mean, it's exactly what you're saying, responding to the data that you're getting and then making more of that one thing that is popular. I can't imagine not being data driven, and hearing that this multi-billion-dollar company is not data driven is fucking crazy.
And then there's a big dynamic, which I'm sure you are experiencing. And maybe this is how your designer friend does it too, where it's like, I get to make the trends. You know, I'm not following the trends. I'm presenting the trends. So I'm an industry leader in my category, you know,
Yeah.
and I am going to present something. And if I can educate and like drive it enough and get enough, you know, virality around it, then people are going to be like, oh yeah, that's great. I like that. You know, it doesn't always work, but because sometimes you create dragon's blood and it blows up and it's like, well, okay, dragon's blood is what we're going to do then, I guess.
And then other times we have extreme Instagram hype around something. And then when it comes to people opening their wallets, they don't.
Yes.
It's very, very interesting that like Instagram hype and people telling you that something is awesome and that they want it does not always translate into them buying it. It's a very interesting thing. And I feel fortunate that the way that we work and the way that my process works, we can pivot if need be.
It's so fascinating. Tell us where we can find you. I'm sure people are going to want to go check out these crazy mugs. So give us your deets.
Instagram is the best place at Hammerly Ceramics. HammerlyCeramics.com. The best way that I can say for people to actually participate in that stuff is to get on the email list.
So, okay, last question to close this off. If you were talking to a young artist who's got promising work and they haven't yet started using social media, they haven't really sold their work yet, what would be your advice? How would you tell them to go forward?
My advice would be to start social media and start documenting your work as early as possible. The big thing that people in that situation need to understand is that documenting your work is a different skill. Making content is a different skill. Instagram is not about art. Instagram is about entertainment. And if you can find a way to entertain people with your work or your personality or something about yourself, then you will be successful. But start early because it's a skill that you're going to have to develop. And I guess the biggest thing I'd say is find someone either in your art form or analogous to your art form that does it very well and copy the shit out of their style, not of their work, but of their content. We're all running around like, hey, man, Josie did that cool little reel. I'm going to copy the shit out of it. So content and generating content are completely different skill sets than actually making your art, and they need to be treated as such. And if you do treat them as such and you can detach your self-worth from your content and the success of your content and just keep making it and getting better, you will do well.
Oh, so wise. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kirk. That was just, I couldn't have said it better.
Thank you. This was fun.
Thanks for being with me. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. Please check out Curt's fabulous Insta and his website, and I do hope you snatch up one of his wonderful mugs because there's nothing quite like having your morning coffee or tea in a beautiful work of art. Just don't take it camping. As always, I appreciate you spending this time with me. If you have been enjoying this series of artist interviews or the content I bring to the podcast, take a moment to drop some stars or a good review. Talk to you next time.